Hi everybody, this is Lilith again. I'm one of your IAs for BIPN 160 and this is my review video for lecture 5. This video will be a lot shorter, so that's good. We'll just go over some cranial nerves, their function, their location, and I will also give you hopefully a helpful tip on how to memorize some things. So on this left side over here, I've written out 1 through 12. So this is 1, 2, 3, all the way till 12th cranial nerve. And so let's go over it. Olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal nerves. What I've done here is you see these pink circles around the first letter of each name of the cranial nerve, and I did that because, as you can see on the right here, I have a phrase that I learned a long time ago from a different professor, so I'll go over the phrase and then see if that's a helpful way of you remembering this. So the phrase is, oh, 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 to touch and feel very good velvet. Ah. So it could be funny. You can change the words and see if something else makes better sense for you and it helps you memorize this better. But it's always just easy for me because I just say, oh, 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 to touch and feel very good velvet. Ah. And then the first letter is, the first letter of the cranial nerve that it corresponds to. So that's one helpful, hopefully, tool to use to memorize the cranial nerves. And then I have another phrase that I learned that will help you memorize which nerve is sensory, which is motor, and which are both sensory and motor. So the trick with this one is over here. It's either going to be an S for sensory, an M for motor, or a B for both. Okay, and again, the number of the cranial nerves is corresponding to the order of this phrase. Okay, the phrase is, some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. So if you can remember this catchy phrase, then if you need to know, for example, what cranial nerve number 8 is it sensory, motor, or both, then you start to count. Some say marry money, but my brother says, and you see that number 8 is starting with S, so you know that vestibulocochlear nerve, which is cranial nerve number 8, is sensory only, right? Another example, if you want to know, let's say number 5, trigeminal nerve, right? Some say marry money, but, and it's a B, so trigeminal is both sensory and motor. Okay, so hopefully that's something that these two can add to your studied techniques, and hopefully they can help. I will move on to going over all 12 cranial nerves. I picked this chart from the lecture notes and I've highlighted the names and the important key terms in the function. And I also took some notes that Dr. Root mentioned during lecture, and I've just combined it here on these 2 pages. So I'll go ahead and go over them. Number 1 is olfactory nerve. Olfactory nerve, as you know from our some say marry money phrase, it is sensory, special sensory, because you'll learn more about this. There are how many special sensories? A few special sensories, because they are located in the brain, not in the brain, in the head/face area, but you don't have to worry about this just yet. Just know that olfactory is a sensory nerve. Olfactory nerve's function is sensation of smell. Remember that these nerves go straight to the olfactory bulb and they bypass the brainstem and they bypass the thalamus. Number 2 is optic nerve. Optic nerve is also sensory and its function is sensation of vision. Optic chiasm is the cross right above our pituitary gland, where the optic nerves or the optic tract crosses, and then know that the optic tract goes to the thalamus. And the optic nerve is also a cranial nerve that bypasses the brainstem because it goes to the thalamus directly. Number 3 is oculomotor nerve. Oculomotor is both somatic motor and visceral motor. It being somatic motor, it can control 4 eye muscles, and these eye muscles are, as Dr. Ruth mentioned, superior, inferior medial rectus, and inferior oblique muscle. Ciliary muscles, I believe, are also by somatic motor. Ciliary muscles are the muscles that are attached to the lens of our eye. Whenever they contract or relax, the shape of the lens changes so we can see farther or closer. The visceral motor portion of oculomotor nerve does some parasympathetic controlling of, so the ciliary muscle is controlled by parasympathetic control. Okay, only these 4 are somatic motor. Ciliary muscle and also the iris of the eye, which is a muscle. When it is contracted, then it makes the pupil more constricted. Okay. Number 4 is trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve controls the superior oblique muscle of the eye. The trigeminal nerve, number 5, is a big nerve. It has a few functions. It allows for us to feel sensation from the skin of our face, and it can also control the muscles of our jaw. To be more detailed, the trigeminal nerve has 3 subnerves, you can call them. V1, which is ophthalmic, V2, which is maxillary, and V3, which is mandibular. Both V1 and V2 are mainly sensory. You can find more details on the lecture notes that Dr. Root provided you. And V3 is mainly motor for chewing. That is called mastication. Cranial nerve number 6 is abducens. Abducens sounds like the word abduction, to take away, abducens. And remember that the lateral rectus of the eye, the muscle lateral rectus, allows for our eye to turn to the left, so to go away from the middle. That's how I remember that. Abducens, I associate it with the lateral rectus muscle taking my eye away from the middle. The cranial nerve number 7 is called the facial nerve, and it has 2 functions also. It allows us to have taste sensation from the front of the tongue only, and then it allows us to be able to control some of the muscles of our face. This is the cranial nerve that in a situation of damage causes what is known as Bell's palsy. Bell's palsy makes the individual's face, usually one side, very limp. You lose control of the muscles. However, it is a transient condition, meaning it can change. And if you take, I believe it was some steroid-based drugs, then this can be reversed. And I'm sure there's other treatments for it too, but we only talked about the drug. Number 8 is vestibulocochlear nerve. 2 functions. Vestibulo is referring to the vestibular structure in our ear, and the vestibular structure allows us to be able to balance ourselves, turn our head, spin, and not fall down. And the cochlear portion of this word refers to the cochlea structure inside our ear, our inner ear, and the cochlea is what we use to hear sounds. So vestibulocochlear is like a joint nerve that allows us to hear and keep our balance. Cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal nerve, has quite a few functions, so let's go over them. Controls some muscles of our pharynx. The word pharynx, pharyngeal, is in the name, so that's easy to remember. Parasympathetic control of parotid salivary gland. Parotid gland is a gland in our mouth. So if you think about a burger or a food that you love, just by thinking about it, your mouth will start to salivate, and that is a parasympathetic action. Glossopharyngeal nerve also allows us to feel taste or sense taste from the back part of our tongue. If you remember, just a few minutes ago we talked about the facial nerve, and that allows for sensation in the front portion of our tongue, the anterior portion, and then glossopharyngeal is the posterior or back side of our tongue. And this is also easy to remember because glosso, in the word glosso, means tongue. So glossopharyngeal, the word is in the name of the nerve, so that's easy to remember. And also glossopharyngeal nerve detects blood pressure changes. You can never mind, I thought I had a good way of remembering this, but if I remember it, I'll let you know. But yes, blood pressure changes, glossopharyngeal nerve. Vagus nerve is a very important nerve. Not that the others aren't important, but vagus is particularly an interesting nerve because it controls, I believe it is more than 90% of all parasympathetic activities that are happening in our body. I think I have learned that from a different class, so don't quote me if that might not be true, but it does play a big part in parasympathetic control of all activity going on in our body. So it controls internal organs, organs mainly in the thorax and abdomen. It can also allow us to feel sensation from internal organs. For example, if we are talking about referred pain, I don't know if I'm talking about it here in this video, but referred pain is when a sensory neuron that is coming from an internal organ, right, which is a visceral sensory neuron, it goes ahead and synapses with a sensory neuron that also has neurons coming from a part of our skin or a part of our somatic nervous system. So that way the pathways of what we're feeling from an organ and what we're feeling on, let's say, an arm, those pathways are merged. So if somebody, I think this is more prevalent in males, if they are experiencing a heart attack or are having a heart attack, then they can experience pain in their left arm. And that is one of the, I would say, most famous examples of referred pain. Okay. So I forgot why I started to talk about referred pain, but maybe because I talked about sensation from internal organs. So vagus nerve is responsible for sensation from internal organs. Okay, and then vagus nerve is also responsible for the muscles of our pharynx and larynx. I think Dr. Root said something that was referring to the gag reflex, and I think it is cranial nerves 9 and 10, glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves, that are stimulated or triggered for us to have a gag reflex, because they both control muscles of our pharynx. And pharynx is, for those who don't know, it's the back of our throat, basically, the back of our mouth. Okay, last two, cranial nerve number 11, accessory nerve. It controls two large muscles on our neck. The muscles are sternocleidomastoid and trapezius. I'm not sure if you need to know these, but it's good that you hear them in case you're asked these on the exam. And cranial nerve number 12, hypoglossal nerve, controls the muscles of our tongue. So if you remember, we talked about the tongue already twice. Facial nerve allows for sensation of the anterior of the tongue. The glossopharyngeal nerve allows for sensation from the back of the tongue, but hypoglossal controls the muscles of the tongue. So we talk about the tongue 3 times, 2 of which are sensory and 1 is motor. Okay. I think that's it for my review of the cranial nerves. I'll go ahead and show you the summary that I've written out for the research study Dr. Root explained at the end of this lecture. So what I gathered from this study was that scientists were able to identify 2 distinct genes that are each produced in different vagal neurons. And vagal neurons are just neurons of the vagus nerve. And because they found that a distinct gene is in each distinct neuron of vagus nerve, they were able to indicate that there are 2 different neurons that serve different sensory functions from the lungs. Okay, so how did this help the scientists? Knowing that there are 2 different genes, they use genetic tools such as Krylok's P system to manipulate the neuronal activity of these 2 different neurons because they wanted to see the effects that these 2 neurons would cause on respiration. And I think at the end they actually did find out that there is a difference between the effects of these 2 neurons, so that was really cool. And the conclusion was that there are different sensory neurons that carry different information, although they both are from the same main vagus nerve, and they are both coming from the lung tissue. Okay, but they carry different information. So I think I feel like from what Dr. Wood explained, that might be a good summary of that research paper. We'll see if on Sunday he says any more details on that you might to know for the exam, but I feel like that might be sufficient. If anything, I'll add it to my next video. Okay, then I will go over these problem questions and again try to answer these as we go so that it's good practice for you. So number 10, which cranial nerve is involved in movement of the eyes? Circle all that apply. So I believe trochlear nerve is involved by controlling the superior oblique muscle of the eye, and oculomotor nerve is also involved in movement of the eyes because it controls those 4 different muscles of the eye, and that allows the eye to move. Facial nerve does not have anything to do with the eye, and then optic nerve doesn't have anything to do with the movement of the eye. Optic nerve just helps with pure vision, that's it. Number 11, lesion to which of the following cranial nerves would cause the eye to be dilated? Remember what causes the eye to dilate or constrict? Remember that it's the iris of the eye, they are 2 different muscles. You don't need to know that many details, but it's basically the oculomotor nerve that is able to control whether our pupil is dilated or constricted. Okay, it wouldn't be abducens because abducens only takes care of controlling the lateral rectus muscle of our eye. Number 12, inflammation of this cranial nerve causes facial paralysis known as Bell's palsy. We talked about this when we discussed the nerve, facial nerve. So I'll go ahead and highlight that. There is no other nerve, to my knowledge, that will cause Bell's palsy, although don't quote me on that. Just know that facial nerve is the one that, during damage, will cause Bell's palsy. Number 21, which of the cranial nerves bypasses the brain, oh god, imagine that, bypasses the brainstem and the thalamus. So we're looking for something that bypasses the brainstem and the thalamus. If we are thinking about a nerve that bypasses only the brainstem, then we will say cranial nerve 1 and cranial nerve 2. However, this question is asking that this cranial nerve is also bypassing the thalamus, so it is only cranial nerve 1, because cranial nerve 1 is the olfactory nerve, and it goes straight to the olfactory bulb, whereas cranial nerve number 2 is the optic nerve that, although bypasses the brainstem, it goes straight to the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. You don't need to know the lateral geniculate nucleus just yet. I think later in the quarter you will. Okay, number 26. A common injury from falling off a horse results from a shift of the ethmoid bone that severs the rootlets of the cranial nerve, leading to permanent loss of one sensory modality. What nerve is severed and what is the lost sensation? So if we didn't talk about this, the ethmoid bone is a bone that is located right behind our forehead, right at the floor of where our brain sits, where our frontal lobe sits, and the ethmoid bone has the small cribriform holes, or I don't know what they're called, but that is where the rootlets of the olfactory nerve come out from, and then they go to the olfactory bulb. So in this case, which nerve is severed? It will be the cranial nerve 1, which is olfactory. And then what sensation is lost? The sensation of smell is lost. 27 asks, list cranial nerves 7 to 12 and provide a description, a few words of what each is involved in. I'll go ahead and do this just because it's fun, but you should also do this for practice. So number 7 is facial nerve. Facial nerve, remember that it allows us to sense taste from the anterior portion of our tongue, and I think it also is it motor for some muscles? Hold on, I'm forgetting. Controls muscles of the face. Yeah, so it controls muscles of our face and taste from the front portion of our tongue. 8 is vestibulocochlear. Vestibulocochlear nerve is for hearing and balance. Number 9 is glossopharyngeal. And this was the big one, I think. It was sensing taste from the back of our tongue, control of the muscles of the pharynx. Was it parotid gland? Yes, parotid salivary gland, and blood pressure changes also. Okay, number 9 is vagus. Vagus is the one that takes care a lot of the parasympathetic activities, sensation from internal organs, and also controls the muscles of the pharynx and larynx. Number 11 is accessory. Accessory nerve is motor for the 2 large neck muscles called sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius, and so these muscles allow us to turn our head and I think also to like look up or something, or move our shoulders. I don't know what, if you work out and know what your traps do, then know that. And then number 12 is hypoglossal nerve, and hypoglossal is able to control the muscles of our tongue. Again, glossal is a term for tongue. So there you go. These are your learning objectives for this lecture. Make sure you look over them just like others. And I think that is it. I'm gonna look at these one more time because I love this one, especially the some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. Anyways, have fun with these. Memorizing these were fun for me, and again, of course, don't hesitate to email me with questions or come to discussion or office hours. Thank you.